Podcast, and here we have one of the old schoolest of them all, Pete Prisco of CBS Sports, and an NFL expert from way back, longtime friend of mine. And I just want to fire up my copy of Jags to Riches. There it is. That's a book that was written about 25 years ago at the dawn of the Tom Coughlin era in Jacksonville. He wrote it with his buddy John Osher. But he's gone on to bigger and better things. Pete, thanks for joining us.
I got about 2 copies behind me, I think, here on the bookshelf. They might have been, you didn't pay for yours, but you might have been one of the few that had one.
That sounds good. We always been a fan of your work, Pete, because you've been pretty even-handed when it comes to the Bengals. You know, I think Bengaldom sees themselves as a bit ostracized by the national media, but you've always given these guys a fair break.
Well, and rightfully so. I think, they had their moments where the organization was a mess. Let's be honest about it. The guys used to get in trouble. They weren't spending a lot of money. The scouting staff was small, but so that all carries over, and everybody keeps harping on the same old things. It's not the same old anymore. It's a much better organization. It's, and I think, Duke Tobin's done a really good job with that team, and he doesn't get enough credit for what he's done. So I think, a lot of the old stuff, the bungles and the, guys getting in trouble and everything else, people remember that. So they kind of carry it over, and it's unfair to the organization, and it's unfair to the guys who are there right now.
And it really hasn't been, it's, since 2011. The thing was with Dalton and Green, the thing was reshaped.
Yeah, I don't understand picking him apart. And even this year, Joe Burrow doesn't want to play for the Bengals. Where did that come from? He never said that. He never came close to saying that. And when I talked to him at the combine, one of the things I said to him, I said, if I was a quarterback and I was as competitive as you are, I would say, I want to go there and I'm changing the culture. And he said, that's exactly how I feel. That's what I want. That's what he wanted to do. He's an Ohio kid. And so, yeah, a lot of the bad feelings about the Bengals Butchie are carried over from years and years ago. And the fact that they haven't won playoff games. And to be honest about it, they've been unlucky not to win some of those playoff games. Carson Palmer when he got hurt, the fiasco against the Steelers at the end of that game. When they had all those incidents happen and everybody went nuts at the end of the game. So
10 years to the day of John Wilkes von Oelhoffen taking out Carson's knee. 10 years later, the same damn thing happens against Pittsburgh. So it's almost kind of like they have to write the script, to fit the narrative almost.
Yeah, and I don't get it. To be honest with you, Butchie, I'll be honest with you. I just think there's certain teams that take a beating. The Bengals are one of them. The Jaguars are the one I covered for years when I lived in Jacksonville. They get picked apart too because of the Jaguars. They laugh at them, ha ha. And, the Lions, the Browns. There's certain teams that just get laughed at all the time, no matter what they do.
Now I know you. I think you were on with Dan Horde a couple weeks ago. You made some pretty strong statements about your guy Burrow. If you care to expound, I don't know if you've revised them after the first 2 games.
No.
How do you feel about the kid?
Well, when he got drafted, I watched his all last season. I watched him the year before. He improved so much. He reminds me of Tom Brady in the pocket, not outside the pocket. He's much more athletic, but the way he navigates it, the way he keeps his head up to look and make throws. And I said that last year when he was at LSU. When he got drafted by the Bengals, I said, this kid is going to win a Super Bowl in the next 10 years and maybe 2. And I got lit up. I got lit up by guys I work with. I got lit up by media. I got lit up by fans. But I believe it. That's how much I think of Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow will be a star quarterback for a long time in the NFL. He has the chip on his shoulder. And he said that. He said, look, I didn't come up the conventional way. I had to work for everything I had. And that drove Tom Brady his entire career, Butchie. And I think it's going to drive Joe Burrow. And I'll give you a story. I told this story a bunch, but at the Combine when I was talking to him, we had Tua on at the Super Bowl. And I said to him, hey, Tua, I said, if you hadn't gotten hurt, would you have come back around and won the national championship? And he goes, well, I can't say that. I can't say that.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear him say, yes, I can. Yes, we would have. So I told Burrow that story, and he kind of chuckled because I think Burrow's one of those guys that has that, he's a natural fiery guy. And he stopped for a second, and he looked at me, and he said, we beat him with him, don't you? And I said, yeah, I know. I said, and that's what you want to hear from your quarterback.
Yeah. That's one of the casualties of the pandemic. The locker rooms closed. So we've only gotten the guy, like this, and I don't think you get with Burrow's story. That's unfortunate because I don't think you get half of his impact. Because I think he's a leader, and I think his chip on that shoulder is contagious from what I can see. And I've only spent a very limited amount of time with him one-on-one, but that's the sense I get, that as good of a player as he is on the field, and he is special in the pocket, Pete. That's exactly right. He's like a welterweight fighter back there, looking for just piling up points and looking to pounce. But it's his demeanor. It's how he handles himself in the room. I mean, that stuff is. I mean, coach's son, the whole bit. Community icon. Even by the time he left high school. I mean, how many kids got a stadium named after him already in their hometown? So, I have to agree with you. He's a little special on and off the field.
And that solves all your. I mean, it doesn't solve all your problems, but if you have that one solved, you can figure out the rest of it. And I'm a big, if you have a franchise quarterback, sustainable success will follow. It's not the aberration season. You go 13-3, the ball bounces your way with Blake Bortles at quarterback, like it happened in Jacksonville a couple of years ago. And they went to the championship game. They didn't go 13-3, but they went to the championship game and led the Patriots by 10 in the fourth quarter. They were going to the Super Bowl, but it wasn't sustainable because they didn't have the franchise quarterback. This is sustainable. If they get good, he will be good for a long time.
The one difference with Joe that they're going to, and they may have to fight through this a little bit, is people were so down on the Bengals when they drafted Palmer and they drafted Dalton. They forgot how good their offensive line was. They had two really good tackles when they drafted Carson. Willie, who should be in the Hall of Fame. Willie Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame, and Levi Jones. And then when they drafted Andy, 8 years later, Whitworth and Andre Smith. And, right now they're trying to work their way through tackles to get that offensive line together. And I think they will eventually, because I think they got one of the best offensive linemen in the league. His name is Joe Mixon. And once they get him off the, Schneid, I think that'll be helpful for Joe. But
Jonah Williams is still learning,
right.
that. He's thrown into the fire, and he will be a good player. The right tackle position needs to be upgraded. I'm sorry, that one needs to be upgraded. I've said that for a long time. They kind of got around that a bit last year with Bobby Hart playing over there. I just think they need to upgrade that position. The center's a good player. People don't realize that. He's a good player. They do need probably better play from the guards. But they're young. They're kids.
Right. And I think that's where Palmer and Andy kind of had an edge a little bit because they had a more experienced offensive line. Now I think this offensive line, I'm gonna give Hart a break because I like Hart's intensity, what he brings to the game, and I really like this move putting Fred Johnson at right guard. I think it's going to help Bobby. I think it's going to help Hopkins. Get two huge guards in there right now between Fred Johnson and Michael Jordan. It's a lot of humanity in there.
Johnson struggled last week though.
Well, it was his first start at right guard. He hadn't taken a right guard rep in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, but he was bad last week. They got to be better. I mean, period. And losing the tight end's going to hurt. I mean, he's not all-world tight end, but he could clearly see that he leaned on him a little bit. That'll hurt. Is John Ross ever going to get going? That's a legitimate question. But I like the pieces. Yeah. I like what they have. Boyd is a good number 2. A.J. Green, I still think he can play at a high level. He had some, he missed them in the opening week. He had him wide open. Right. Should have been a touchdown. He missed them. I like where they're headed, Butchie, on offense. I really do.
How about the rest of the league, Pete? And I want to get a little bit into your background because you're like myself. You're a newspaper guy, and you made the move. You made the move over to cyberspace. But you cut your teeth on the newspaper game, and it's really
I did.
And you're using the same skills there now, right? I mean, basically.
Not anymore, not as much anymore. I mean, but you still
There's
use,
still
what
information,
skills,
though. But it's.
what skills you use, Butch, how to ferret it out. We were raised on and trust and people leaning on you and trusting you and knowing when you're not going to burn them and how they can talk to you. And I think that's kind of gone away a little bit in this industry. Guys that don't come up as newspaper guys don't learn how to cover a team or cover a league or, you can't just write a blog and blitzkrieg a guy when you can't go show your face. And that's coming, some of the things that I learned. This is my 20th year with CBS. When I left, it was Sportsline, and then it became CBS Sportsline, and now we're CBSSports.com. But I barely write anymore. I write, I do a little bit of writing and everything, but we have a 24-hour sports network now, CBS Sports HQ, and I'm on there all the time. And it's fun and it's interactive. And we have, ex-NFL players like Brady Quinn and Danny Cannell and Bryant McFadden and Scott Pioli works with us. And I give everybody, I push back on them. You know me. You've seen me with coaches and Coughlin and guys. I push back and they enjoy it. It's fun. It's banner. It's talking football. It's guys talking football in a educated, smart way. And yet you can still take some shots at each other, little playful shots. It's fun. I really enjoy it. It's been a great transition for me, and I'm happy I did it.
Yeah, you came over the same year I came over to the Bengals, 2000. Pete, best player you've seen since you've covered the league? Who's the best player you've seen?
The best player?
Yeah.
At live? Because
you've covered. Well, they live, right?
Jerry Rice.
Right.
Jerry Rice to me is the greatest football player ever. And the reason I say that is I think he's so much better than every other receiver. Right. You could make an argument at quarterback. You could make an argument at pass rusher. I think LT would probably be second as the pass rusher. But you could say Reggie White, Bruce Smith. I don't think wide receiver there's any debate. People would say Randy Moss would be next, but he's not close. Terrell Owens. No, Jerry Rice, that makes him – he's not the most valuable player in the league, clearly with the quarterbacks that are, but Jerry Rice is the greatest football player I've seen with my own two eyes.
We've also talked about this Hall of Fame argument too, because I think Baselli, fine player, but me, I'm a Willie Anderson guy strictly because of the right tackle situation, and you can make an argument for his run. Maybe Tony was the best left tackle, maybe for a stretch there, and I guess on the death of Gale Sayers, who showed that, today Gale died, but he certainly showed if your career is good enough, no matter how short it is, you belong. I guess Baselli can be in that argument. But to me, Willie Anderson, they talk about these tackles from the era you're talking about, when we really first started covering the league, the Ogdens, Baselli, Rolfe, and Walter Jones. The best right tackle of them all is not in. And that I get left tackle. I get it's a high premium position, but Willie came along at a time when, the guy on the opposite end of the right tackle is just as athletic as the guy opposite the left tackle.
But Willie gets pinged because he played right tackle, and right tackle was people say it was a different position back then. It wasn't the left tackle. Now right tackle, they have a lot of pass rushers from that side. But Willie definitely deserves Hall of Fame consideration. I think Willie and Baselli and Fred Taylor and Ken Anderson and guys like that, Ken Riley, they get hurt by where they played.
Right. Yeah.
Fred
Taylor gets hurt by that. Fred Taylor, well, he also gets hurt by the injury bug, I guess, but also.
But he really did. You know what? He played enough, though, Butchie. There was,
right.
The one year when Fred Taylor got hurt, he tore the muscle off the bone. Think about that. He was running. Right. It looked like he got shot. And Coughlin listed him as week to week every week, so everybody thought he was, Fragile Fred.
Right.
He tore the muscle off the bone. Right. Fred Taylor deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Willie Anderson deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Ken Riley deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Well, and then Ken Anderson deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
And I'll give you another guy when we're talking running backs. And I agree with Fred, because what's the difference between Fred and Curtis Martin? Curtis Martin played in New York and New England, probably. That's probably the difference.
Well, Curtis Martin never averaged the yards per carry like Fred did. He piled up a lot of yards and carried the ball. It wasn't the same style. Fred Taylor was electrifying.
But here's another guy, Corey Dillon, I think should get mentioned. All-time leading rusher for one team, single season leading rusher for another team, it's one of the reasons, and he's the reason Brady's got 6 rings. He's the reason because he got one of them for him.
It's amazing Curtis Martin got in the way he did. And don't get me wrong, he probably should be in, but you can't just dismiss Fred Taylor and Corey Dillon and Ricky Waters. There's a lot of guys out there. If you go back and look at how they played, they deserve to get in that same conversation. I mean, Edgerrin James went in. Fred Taylor was every bit as good as Edgerrin James. To be honest with you, I think he was better than Edgerrin James. What Edgerrin first couple years was fantastic, and then he got hurt. Fred Taylor was better than Edgerrin James after that.
Yeah, I think if you put Corey Dillon with Peyton Manning, he would have been pretty good too. You got to remember.
I know people in the Colts organization who said at the time when Fred and Edgerrin were playing, if you had swapped them out, they could only imagine what Fred Taylor would do in that offense. Remember, he was a 231-pound guy who went 4.2.
Yeah,
4.3.
No, he chewed up this club in the late '90s. There's no question about it. I mean, he was a terror.
Yeah, they were the same division back then. Remember?
Oh yeah, it was Fred, it was Corey, it was Eddie George, and Jamal Lewis. And Jamal Lewis. Go back and look at Jamal Lewis, and you forget about Jamal.
Bettis too.
Right. You forget about Jamal Lewis. I just did something on because of what the Bengals just killed the Browns in the running game, but Jamal Lewis is the guy who's got the most career yards against the Browns and the Bengals.
Yeah, no, he was. He was. It was a good division, competitive division, tough division.
Real quick, Pete.
Remember when the Bengals got off to the great start with Jeff Blake, and then the Jaguars beat him when they played cover 2 against them the whole game.
Remember how about when the Bengals beat Jacksonville in '95 at the end of the game? And Pickens was still griping about cover because they couldn't run the ball. Pickens was he won the game, and he was still griping about the inability to hit cover 2.
Yeah, it was amazing. That was a good division because the Pittsburgh-Jacksonville rivalry was good. The Pittsburgh-Baltimore rivalry was good. Yeah. People don't realize in that division, the year the Ravens, I don't know if you remember this, but the year the Ravens set the scoring record for a 16-game season when they won the Super Bowl that year.
Marvin was the DC.
Jacksonville went to Baltimore and scored 36 points on him, and Jimmy Smith had 270 yards receiving in that game. Think about that. Yeah. They scored. They set the scoring record for the season. Still stands for a 16-game season. And they scored 36 points. Jimmy Smith had 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was good too.
I still think the most stunning game I've ever seen is when Tennessee walked into Jacksonville in '99 and won that AFC championship. Just stunning.
The best team didn't win that year. Jacksonville was the best team, and they couldn't figure out how to handle Tennessee. And remember in that game, they had them, and the punt returner fumbled at the end of the half and gave him a field goal. They came out in the second half, got a safety on a play that Jimmy Smith was wide open, should have been a 99-yard touchdown from the 1-yard line, and they busted the right tackle and the right guard, and they had a safety. And the next play, they returned the punt for a touchdown. The kick was a free kick for a touchdown. Derek Mason did. Game was over. Yeah. That franchise hadn't been the same since that safety.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just like this franchise hasn't been the same since Jeremy Hill fumbled the ball. That happens to franchises.
I think your franchise hasn't been the same since Carson Palmer got hurt.
Yeah.
They were going to win that game. That was a good Bengals team.
Yeah.
And once he went down, they were different.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Pete, real quick. It's a Wednesday, so it's busy for you and me. How do you see the season shaking out this year? Who wins it all? Who goes to the Super Bowl?
I think the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl again. I don't think we've seen anything close to the best of them. And I don't know how you feel about this, but they want to run the ball with that rookie runner. All well and good. If I'm playing them, have at it, guys. I'd rather you run that guy than throw the other guy around.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get it. Everybody raved about him in week 1. Look at the rookie running the ball. Yeah. Hey, if he's running it, that means the other guy ain't throwing it.
Yeah.
I think he throws it this week against the Ravens, though, because they'll come after him and he'll get a lot of man coverage. So I do think he'll throw it this week.
But there's only about 2 or 3 human beings you want to throw the ball around like that. Everybody else, you should run the ball. I think.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, no, Butchie, come on, you're old school. You throw to score, you run to win.
Right.
You throw to get your lead, you run in the third and fourth quarter when you have the lead. You can't play to run anymore. If you go run, pass nowadays, you're a fool. With the way the rules are, You got to throw to score, run to win.
Well, to me, the rules almost make it a time of this is a time of possession league now. You're gonna, no matter how good your defense is, you're gonna give up points. You could pitch a great game and give up 27 points. And to me, the best defense is not letting them have the ball.
Are you still stuck in 1950? What the hell is wrong with you?
I guess so.
You want to score. The whole object of the game is to score.
If you can.
If you want to, you're the kind of guy that's going, I'm going to have a 10-play, 72-yard drive to my field goal. And me, I'm going to have a 2-play drive to my 80-yard touchdown. Yeah. No, you don't want to play for field goal. You want to score.
I want to play the clock. I want to play the clock.
You want to score and then play the clock in the fourth quarter.
A guy who was great with the clock, who I thought could manage a game, was your favorite and my favorite, one of my favorites, Tom Coughlin. He would get teams ready, and
he was a great preparation coach, but he blew his end of games too.
I think they all do. There's so many.
Belichick does too. Look, why did Belichick the other day when they the Monday night? I could come up with about 10 Belichickian blow the end of game situations, and he's the greatest coach of all time, probably, right?
Right.
So think about it.
Yeah.
Last Monday night, why did he not call timeout or have his team spike the ball after the long pass? He went home with a timeout.
Right.
End it down.
Yeah.
Against the Ravens in the playoff game one year, he tried to run out the clock by having Brady take the snap and move around and then down himself, remember? And he didn't do it, so he had to punt in the middle of the field, and then they had a shot into the end zone.
Right.
Then there's the game against Seattle. He can talk all he wants. He looked over and he saw Pete. He should have called timeout. The time on the clock was his.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, so they all blow it. Every single one of them. And then what about 4th and Jackass in Indianapolis? I still think he blew that one.
Right.
When he went for it on his own end, remember?
But it just goes to show you, though, if you coach in the league long enough, people are going to remember those as much as they're going to remember the great calls.
And he is the greatest coach of all time in my mind. He really is. I know Shula has more victories, but this guy doing it in the era that he did it, the way he did it, makes him the greatest of all time in my mind. But even he blows it, and he's blown plenty of them. And if I sat down and sat across from the table from Bill Belichick and outlined why I think he blew it, he'd probably sit there and go, you make good points. Maybe I did blow it at the end of the games, because they all do it.
Yeah, I think Bill would tell you best coach of all time is Paul Brown. I think he would.
Paul Brown's in the conversation. There's no question about that. For all the innovation, for what he did, for the wins and everything. I don't think there's any. It's Shula, Paul Brown, Belichick. Those are your great coaches right there.
No question.
Bill Walsh. Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. Think about that.
Right, and Bill Walsh really changed with stuff that he worked on in Cincinnati, really changed the passing game, really changed the 70s and 80s.
Right, the West Coast offense. It came from the back. Well, that was the Greg Cook's situation, right? When he hurt his arm. He
hurt his arm, and that was the reason for the West Coast was because Virgil Carter
couldn't throw
it from here to there, and so it became the horizontal. It became the horizontal passing game. They got
Greg Cook would have been phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah, that's another part of this story too. Is it's funny because when you go to Athens to visit Burrow's hometown, you got to pass through Chillicothe, which is Greg Cook's hometown, and
he could throw that ball, man.
Well, Walsh said he would have been the greatest. He would have been the greatest of all time, and I know Mike Brown feels like he knows who might have been the team of the '70s in the AFC Central. It might not have been the Steelers.
Yeah, well, I mean, you would have had Greg Cook, but you would have needed a little more than that, Butchie. That Steelers team was loaded. Come on.
Defensively, it sure was, but it would have been nice to see if Cook could have outdueled Bradshaw. But Bradshaw would tell you that Kenny Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame.
Kenny Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Any thoughts you want to leave us with, Pete? How about this? What do you see in Philly? I'm going to get you on the record here. What do you see happening down in Philly?
They better pick it up.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, they were terrible, the Eagles, the other day. The Redskins game, the Washington football team game, they were ahead by 17 and kind of took the foot off the pedal, and Wentz played poorly. And they didn't have Lane Johnson and Miles Sanders. Well, they get those guys back, and they still don't play well. defensively, they're not very good right now. Even guys like Fletcher Cox, they're not playing great football. So, but I still think that the Eagles will find a way. You know, they're a better team. They're at home. I think they'll find a way, and I think Wentz gets it cranked up a little bit against the Bengals this week.
But you'll be there when Burrow takes us all the way. So you have called it. So I hope you'll be there.
I called it. I said those guys give me crap. They go 2-10. They always have a hashtag now. Guys I work with 2-10 because I said not 1. He might win 2-10. How about that?
We like that on Bengals.com. We thank you for stopping by the Old School Scribe Podcast, Pete. Always a pleasure. Hope to see you soon down the road.
You got it. Take care, Butchie.
Thanks, Pete.